Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I want to explain just why I think the Cummings revelations, as untrustworthy as some of them undoubtedly are the most important political story in the UK right now. I'd also like to talk about, for all the mud thrown Johnson's way, it was Matt Hancock that Dominic Cummings decided to really throw under the bus. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the Cummings revelations, on one level, the spiteful act of a deeply dishonest elitist prick trying to get revenge on another deeply dishonest elitist prick. It's a dead cat, some have said, but it's not. See, a dead cat is when you distract from an important story with a lesser one amplified to drown out what really matters. Now, here's the thing. You may believe that the bulk of the pandemic damage has been done. There will be an inquiry at some point. It may be way into the future and not do any harm to the people it needs to do harm to, but it will happen and the truth will come out. And indeed, I won't argue with that too much. You may think there are bigger stories. Brexit continues to get worse. The political tensions in Northern Ireland are on course for serious overheating in a matter of weeks. The NHS is being sold to the lowest bidder. Several sectors of our economy are being laid waste, and we are turning into a tin-bot dictatorship. How is this more important to poke at something that's done now? Simple. All of those things I've just mentioned, in theory, more important and certainly more pressing issues are going to happen unless they are stopped. Northern Irish tensions are going to boil over. Our economy is going to continue to tank. The NHS is going to continue to go to ruin, and we are going to carry on the path to dictatorship until the government, are brought down. It's really all there is to it. That's it. With the NHS, we're going to get to a situation where they run it down so badly that they say the public funding model has failed. Private insurance is needed. The Americans have got the best healthcare in the world. We should copy them. It's all going to happen. And it will continue to happen until the government, as I say, is removed. But how to remove a highly successful populist government? They need to be exposed. The evidence given by Dominic Cummings has the potential to contribute to Johnson's downfall. It isn't a silver bullet. It isn't going to bring him down with one devastating headline. It's also unlikely to do much damage right now. It's more a slow burner for later. But I talked more about that in my earlier PMQs video. But it can contribute, and that's what makes it an important story. More important, ironically, than the more objectively pressing issues. Ultimately, one thing that we know would absolutely sink Johnson is a public inquiry into his pandemic handling. The tensions in Northern Ireland, he's blaming someone else for them. The economy, he'll say to one group it's doing great, and to the other group that don't believe it, that it's someone else's fault. Everything is either going great or someone else's fault. The public inquiry will be different. Boris Johnson is resisting it. He can't resist forever, but he can delay it and make sure that it's large enough so that when it does start, it's not able to report until after the general election. In other words, the public inquiry is not guaranteed to sink him before the general election. He can absolutely delay it. So anything that increases the public pressure to bring it forward is important. More important, arguably, than anything else. But what I found surprising was how, of all the senior members of the government that Cummings talked about, it was Matt Hancock that got it in the face with both barrels. There's me thinking he's gone there to savage Johnson. And yes, he attacked Johnson. I will talk about that in another video. But his overall assessment of Boris Johnson, if you were watching this and believing it all, was simply that he was an idiot and unfit to lead. But Matt Hancock was the devil, according to his testimony anyway. At some point in the afternoon, James O'Brien asked on Twitter what people thought was the biggest bombshell. Now, I responded that I thought it was the fact that Boris Johnson wouldn't deny saying that he effectively didn't want to lift a finger to save the elderly. He denied other allegations, but this is one of the ones he didn't deny. But if I could choose another, it would be centred around the care home deaths. So if you've been following things throughout this pandemic, you may be aware that for quite a long time, elderly patients were being moved out of hospitals and into care homes without a COVID test. As a result, a lot of COVID sufferers were sent to enclosed areas full of the most vulnerable people in our society. As a result of refusing to shield care homes, tens of thousands of people died unnecessarily. But Cummings alleges that this was not the government's plan. He said that Cabinet, including Boris Johnson, thought that patients were being tested first. Cummings said that it was Hancock that promised Cabinet that they were being, but then ordered this not to be done, unilaterally. Now, the motivation is obvious. He's the health secretary. Politically awkward if the hospitals couldn't take patients due to being up to capacity. Bear in mind, they created these temporary hospitals, the so-called Nightingale hospitals. If hospitals are full and can't take patients, people would say, well, why don't you take them to the Nightingale hospitals then? That would have been exposed as a sham. And nothing you could do about it. After 10 years of Tory neglect, that was all there was to it. We didn't have the staff. We had some temporary beds in the Nightingales. We didn't have the staff to staff them. So he knew that testing them would delay their discharge, so he ordered no tests to be carried out. And we saw the result. But it was a surprise to me to hear that Hancock did this on his own. And not just unilaterally, but actively lying to his own Cabinet colleagues to cover it up. Now, as to the truth of this, I don't know. We do know that patients were discharged until about mid-April without tests. I even talked about it at the time. But was Cabinet in on it? Or as Cummings says, was Hancock solely responsible for this? He even suggested that Johnson hit the roof when he found out the truth, but didn't sack him. Cummings says that it was a mistake not to sack Cummings. It was a mistake not to sack Cummings, not to sack Hancock. But that, it seemed to Johnson, that if they kept him in place, then they could sacrifice him later on when the public inquiry started its work. Now, interestingly, this is another thing that Downing Street have refused to deny. They were asked, was Matt Hancock close to being sacked last year? They refused to answer that question. Again, the official spokesperson did deny a few things, didn't deny that. Now, what I would like to know is, what did Matt Hancock himself know about this? Did this come as a surprise to him yesterday? Was he surprised that actually he was close to being sacked, or did he know about it? Is this going to create a rift between Johnson and Hancock? See, Hancock's not that. He's younger than I am. He must still think he's got a potentially long and successful political career ahead of him. He's certainly ambitious. He was a bit miffed, apparently, when he didn't become Chancellor when Sajid Javid left. I can't imagine he would welcome the chance to be a scapegoat when all the pandemic blundering does finally come out. And I don't just mean from Cummings, who can easily be disbelieved. Because Boris Johnson may imagine that he can suppress it long enough so that he rides it out and he's gone and doing something else. Matt Hancock probably still wants to be in frontline politics in 10 years' time. He's not going to want to get blamed for this. Not that he would be a scapegoat in the normal sense, because he is actually guilty, but he'd be taking the full blame. I actually talked last year about how I felt Hancock was only being kept on to take the fall later. Because he was never one of Johnson's traditional allies, and so not part of his inner circle, really. Easy to be sacrificed. And if this is how it starts to play out, I wonder if Hancock will start leaking a few things himself. Maybe he'll take out a leaf out of Dominic Cummings' book and start saving lots of documents that could be used to make sure that the mud sticks to a few other people as well when it comes. And Cummings also said that Hancock also promised Cabinet a shielding plan for the vulnerable, but that this was a lie too. Again, we know it was a lie, but whose lie? The suggestion is that Cabinet thought there were plans in place to protect lives, and Hancock alone was preventing them being put into place. Now, because Cummings was laying it on pretty thick against Hancock, questions were asked about proof. There were in particular Conservative MPs, unsurprisingly, asking him, are you going to prove all this then? After all, he'd called Hancock a liar multiple times. When asked if Cummings would publish the evidence, he said he'd think about it, but was wary of publishing private messages. And I said this before. The bottom line is Dominic Cummings had suggested that he would be prepared to publish text, WhatsApp messages, emails, things like that. He's going to need to. You know, this came up a couple of times. He said he'd take advice on the matter. He may, basically, but he didn't commit to it. The bottom line, though, is that if Cummings is serious about causing political damage to those whom he feels have wronged him, he's going to need the documentary evidence. His testimony alone is worthless. His word is worth even less than that of Boris Johnson. Not because he's a bigger liar, but he's a less credible one. There are people who bafflingly believe Boris Johnson. I don't think anyone believes Dominic Cummings. Because let's remember what Cummings' objectives are here. It is not, as he claims, to put the record straight and learn to save future lives. This is the man behind Brexit. He's the kid on a hot day with a magnifying glass, and we are the ants. It's revenge and to enhance his own future employment prospects. He was careful to praise certain ministers who might well be in the ascendancy after Johnson falls, whenever that is. So in terms of what he said, it falls into one of these roughly 5 categories. 1, something that is relevant and borne out by verifiable facts. It adds to the pressure on Johnson, but it is stuff we already knew, like herd immunity being the strategy. Yeah, we knew that. Boris Johnson said it on the telly. We've still seen the recordings. 2, it's something that is irrelevant and just Cummings trying to persuade the committee of his great ideas. Like he was talking at one point about how our electoral system is crap. Yes, it is, but that's not relevant, is it? So that can be dismissed as simply his ego butting into the conversation. 3, something that Johnson or others refused to deny. That's what emerged yesterday. That was the main thing that emerged yesterday. That is decent political ammunition. After all, if an allegation is untrue and damaging, you just deny it, don't you? 4, something that Cummings can back up with proof. Now that's what I'm waiting for. That's what I want to emerge in the future. It's something that I suppose will not emerge quickly, particularly given his hesitancy over publishing texts and so on. But that is what needs to emerge in order for it to do any real damage even later on. And then finally 5, something that can't be verified. Might be true, might not be. Not going to take Dominic Cummings' word for it, just because it suits my political leanings for it to be true. But yes, Matt Hancock properly under the bus. But he did have some things to say about Johnson as well, which I do want to get onto, maybe tomorrow. Unless something else gets thrown up before then. Maybe he does publish a load of texts. But I suspect that's not going to come quickly. But until then, those are my thoughts. Hope you found them interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.